Today on the ADOTAT Show, we're diving straight into how Clive Sirkin keeps his cool in the hybrid work circus. You'll learn the secrets from the guy who turned Leo Burnett, Kimberly-Clark, and Kellogg's on their heads. Now he's weaving magic at ScreenDragon, the work automation platform that's shaking up project management. Get ready for juicy tidbits, career highs, and some brutally honest wisdom. Buckle up, folks. This is going to be one wild ride.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal powerhouse.
All right, folks. Welcome to the ADOTAT Show, where we cut through the corporate BS and get straight to the good stuff. Today we snagged Clive Sirkin, the man who's done it all from running this show at Leo Burnett to shaking up things at Kimberly-Clark and Kellogg's. Now he's the big cheese at ScreenDragon. We're diving through his roller coaster career, his thoughts on hybrid work, and maybe we'll get him to spill some personal secrets. Grab your popcorn, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. So, all right, Clive, let's cut through the corporate fluff. How are you really doing today? Not the linked up version, the real deal.
You know, it's funny. How am I doing? I'm doing great. I mean, on the surface, I'm doing great. I mean, things, every morning I wake up and I'm truly, truly grateful for what's going on in my life and the fun that I'm having. And, I've been lucky. I've been very lucky. But the reality is, when you say how you're feeling, is I'm feeling worried. And it's got nothing to do with business, although it's ultimately an impacts business. I'm worried about the world we live in. And I'm worried about what it does to humans and how humans have become, and how hostile people have come to one another and how they engage with each other, and how people are increasingly losing the willingness to listen and talk to each other and show some civility to each other, even when you disagree. So right. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's on my mind. I think about it a lot, and it's particularly in the times that we're in, right?
Any new obsessions that keep you up at night? And please tell me it's tic-tac dance videos.
It's not. Although I do play balls, which is my sort of drug when I need to disappear. I'm constantly, any new obsessions? Every morning I have another obsession. It's part of my DNA. I'm probably a little manic. But for me, it's like I constantly am looking for interesting things. And if you open your eyes, the world's filled with interesting things. So, it's both a drug and a gift and a curse.
Why is it a curse?
Well, you have to. One of the things that I haven't learned how to do is to say no and to focus. And if you don't focus, it becomes a curse.
So if I need $50, you're the guy I ask?
Probably, if it's a good cause. But more generosity is more about ideas. So I tend to approach an idea or a thought that someone has with the instinct of, that's fantastic, how do we make it great? As opposed to, that's not going to work. And generally that served me well, but at some point you got to say no, and it's not going to work, or I'm not going after that. And it's very hard for me to not get excited about people's ideas.
So what's your guilty pleasure for unwinding? And you can't say yoga unless it's that one with the goats where they get on top of each other.
Don't joke. A very, very dear personal friend of mine who sadly passed away, who was both my boss and my mentor, my friend, him and his wife had goats on their farm, and they would do lunches where you could have lunch with the goats. But no, that's not my escape. My pleasure is cycling. I've become an avid cyclist. And so when I want to unlock, completely get away from it, I get on my bike and I pedal. It's one of the greatest things.
Is there a Tour de France in your future?
No.
Any yellow jerseys? No?
No. But I'm not bad, but I'm, so there is a Tour de France that I'll go and watch, which I'm planning to go this summer to go and watch one of the legs in Pau. But that's as close as I'm going to get to the Tour de France.
So what's the biggest curveball life has thrown at you recently, like a cosmic pie in the face moment?
I haven't had one. I mean, honestly, I haven't had
nothing
one.
That's knocked you flat on your face?
No. And I say that not to be arrogant or, to project some sort of invincibility or that. But I guess the only curveballs that bother me are like personal, like health or family or losing, business and stuff like that. It's not any negativity or downsides are not curveballs. Curveballs to me are, I mentioned, a dear friend of mine, losing someone close to you. That's a curveball. Seeing suffering, that's a curveball. But in terms of, day-to-day life and business, there aren't many curveballs, not in the way I process things. Maybe
All right,
I'm
so
just too...
moving on, tell us a little about ScreenDragon. What makes it the secret sauce for project management that everyone needs to know about? And what's the most bizarre way a client has ever used it?
That's interesting. So I'm involved in a lot of startups, but ScreenDragon is my favorite child, if you will. It's my baby. It's something that's really personal to me. I met the founders of ScreenDragon easily 20 years ago, early days in their journey when they founded the company. Company's gone through 3 or 4 iterations. I sort of joke and say it's a 5-year startup in a 20-year-old body. And I was immediately attracted, and this is how I sort of approach all sort of investment opportunities, is the humans. And so I was immediately attracted to the humans who are now still the management and still the founders of the company and still actively involved in the company and running the company. And they came across to me as not like the rest, both in terms of how they thought and how they behaved. Fast forward over the years, ScreenDragon is now a purpose-built work automation platform. We specialize for now in the marketing and agency world. And you say, what's the secret sauce? Because there's a lot of technology out there, and there's a lot of competition in this marketplace, and there's a lot of terrific technology available that we compete against, and we respect them. But I think what makes ScreenDragon unique, and why, and frankly, I'm a 2-time customer of ScreenDragon, and now I'm on the team. But I'd say 3 things. One, it's designed to address the root cause of what causes problems. A lot of times people will buy technology and they're not clear what they're trying to solve. And ScreenDragon is very clear about what's the root cause they're trying to solve, which is, in my language, process friction. And we can talk about that later. They really understand what causes process friction, which the net implication of process friction is more work, and work that's not value add. And so ScreenDragon as a platform is designed to automate and simplify and take work out, literally take work out. The second thing, it's designed with a deep, nuanced understanding of the processes it automates. So it's not just raw technology, blind technology, generic technology. It's technology designed to solve the problems it's trying to automate and the processes it's trying to automate. And I think the third thing, which is something that sort of, if I ever were kept up at night, this would be a thing that would keep me up at night, is what makes a difference is the people. And because we're a relative, we compete against the big gorillas, we're a small organization. And what differentiates us and what people tell us when they become customers and very sticky customers and long-term customers is that the people who deliver the technology, the people who engage and design the customization of the technology or the configuration of the technology are people who are deeply tenured. So because we're a 20-year-old organization plus, we have incredible tenure. So we have people who have been with us 17 years, 15 years, 12 years, and are truly, and these are engineers and consultants, really understand our clients. And so when they engage with the clients, 2 things. 1, there's really a problem they haven't seen, and therefore they're more creative in finding a solution. And 2, they stick with our clients. So we've had clients for 10 years plus, and they've basically seen the same people over and over again, and it breeds an intimacy and a familiarity and a sense of shared ownership of outcomes. And that's really important, and it's a big difference.
Who's the Goliath in your field?
Workfront, Adobe. I mean, we tend to run into them more often than any other platform out there. There are a number of other ones, but certainly Adobe and specifically Workfront, they're the Goliath, and they're a formidable competitor for all the obvious reasons.
Is there any features that you're particularly proud of that make you want to strut around like a peacock?
Yes, all of it. But at its very core, what's special, and I talked about it in terms of it understands the processes we're trying to solve. It's a no-code platform. So it's basically a forms platform. And so we have the ability, because we understand that every client, every customer we have has their own way of working. They have their own language. When I was at Kimberly-Clark, we had the Kimberly-Clark way. When I was at Kellogg's, we had the K way, and I think they still have the K way. when you're in an agency, each agency has their way of working. Leo Burnett had a very specific way of working. And on top of that, every client you serve as an agency has their own way of working. Because we're a no-code platform, we can configure to 100% the way every single client works, the language they use. And when you do that, you remove friction. Okay, you remove process friction, and you help them move forward. And there's very few, if any, other platforms out there that could do it with the ease and the low cost that we do it because we're no code, and it's all configuration. And all of the competitors out there, sure, you can do things, but it's coding and complex configuration, which is time and money. So there's a lot I love about it. I'm obviously not objective, but that's the thing that I think is our secret sauce and that I'm most proud of.
So what's the next big thing we should expect from your team of wizards at ScreenDragon?
And wizards there are. I mean, I think the usual suspects. I think obviously, like every other platform out there, intelligent and commercial use of AI. And that's a whole discussion to be had. But you should expect all of the technology used to be intelligently and commercially using AI versus just sort of random acts of AI. I think you would see from us deeper integration and partnerships to reduce process friction. I mean, essentially, with the highway system, we connect the ecosystem. So we're constantly thinking about how do we create deeper integrations, not just APIs, but truly work-related integrations and deeper partnerships so that we can bring the ecosystem together in service of our clients' commercial outcomes. And then, as we expand and grow, because we're in an incredible growth stage right now, we will deliver deeper and more specialized vertical solutions for the customers we're in. So even just within marketing, we started off and we were, more general in terms of solving for a marketing organization. We become much more specialized. We become really adept in linking together e-commerce ecosystems and the digital shelf. And you should expect us to continue to get more specialized in terms of our vertical solutions.
So do you have any epic success stories from clients using ScreenDragon that make you want to fist pump in the air? And you're allowed to brag here.
Yeah,
it's your time. Your time to shine.
It's our time to shine. It's really not my time. I don't. You said something in the beginning about something like Big Cheese or something. I got a fancy title, but I do the very little work. We're a technology company, and the talent resides.
It's the first time I've interviewed someone that says they do very little work.
I genuinely do. I mean, I'd like to say I look good, but we're on camera, so the facts sort of don't support that assertion. But we have an extraordinary team of people sitting in Cork and London and Chicago and Amsterdam. The big successes, there are many, and I'm proud of all of our clients. There are two that sort of come to mind in terms of just how interesting and the complexity and the scale. One is the International Olympic Committee. They're one of our long-serving clients. Every single brand that does anything with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, so renting any aspect of the Olympics, any asset, uses the ScreenDragon.
That includes IP?
Yeah. And so any content that they create has to go through our platform to secure approval in Luzerne from the IOC. So you can imagine, I still struggle, but I see behind the scenes a little bit of this. It's one of the most complex, if not the most complex, rights management systems that exist, because you're talking about thousands of brands, thousands of iterations in terms of local, national, global, and sports and athletes. So the complexity is extraordinary. I mean, just absolutely extraordinary. How the team put this together and made it seem so incredibly simple and allowed, thousands of transactions on a daily basis to happen with ease is extraordinary. So I'm super proud of that, and I think it's incredible. The other one, and I'll use them as an example, but it's a proxy for a number of things, is a large pharma company based in New York, massive, and their CMO and chief experience officer and their team came to us. They had, over 250 agencies, and we have a system that connects their tactical plans to their execution, to their fees, and to all of the iterations. So they have incredible visibility at their fingertips, and their ability to track scope of work, fees, tactical plans, executions, and changes, and wire it all together. And we've taken a massive amount of work out of them. And I think the biggest compliment I got when I had coffee with their leader a couple of weeks ago in New York, and she said something to me that really struck home with me, sort of says, this is worth the while. She said, we are making substantial, significant decisions. Our CFO is using this platform to drive substantial commercial decision-making out of it, beyond just removing complexity. And when you hear those stories, it's sort of like, this is real stuff, and you feel good about it because, again, I'll keep coming back to this concept of process friction. What breaks organizations is generally you hire fantastic talent and then you get them doing all kinds of things that are non-value add, and they go home at the end of the day and they say, I do more work managing the beast than I actually do for what you hired me for. And that's like a massive inefficiency, but it's also a massive destruction of talent. And so whenever we can get talent focused on what they were hired to do, which is value add work or good for the soul, it's a huge deal for us. So, I could go on and go through all of the customers that we have, but those are two that sort of jump to mind.
So what's the biggest headache that ScreenDragon faces in the market today, like a migraine that just won't?
There are two. One is obviously how do you grow fast? How do you scale growth, but yet at the same time maintain all those things that I talked to you about that makes us different, right? So the migraine for me is we just took on an incredible partner, an investor with Hermes and Kenneth. We have the funds to grow now. We're investing in the business. We're growing, 25, 30, 35, 40% if you look over the last 4 years. So we're seeing really terrific growth. The question is, as you bring on new talent and you hire new people and you expand at that kind of scale and pace, how do you make sure that you absolutely stay true to who you are and you don't cut corners? And how do you make sure that you continue with that thing that makes us different, which is this sort of intimacy and consistency and tenure in terms of the relationships in the business? And that's a problem with any company that scales is often as you get over a certain size and you get at a certain pace, you lose track of who you are. So for me, that's the migraine. I mean, there's going to be challenges every day: cash management, legal risks, product development, AI. I mean, AI is changing everything. Competitive pressures. We're up against the best of the best. Those are all day-to-day sort of fundamental things you need to think about and deal with. But retaining who you are and your DNA as you grow is the biggest sort of, for me, worry.
Speaking of competitors, are any of them giving you sleepless nights with their annoying brilliance?
All of them, because we always say we respect our competitors, and I believe in I experience this. Whenever I used to go around and give speeches a lot, I don't do it anymore. I would always ask in the audience, "Is there anyone here from Procter & Gamble?" Because when I was at Kimberly-Clark, having as big a competitor as P&G and as talented a competitor as P&G made us better once we understood who we were and who they were. Adobe, Primo, I can rattle. There's a lot of really, really, really good players out there who deliver fantastic technology. And it's good for us because it keeps us sharp and we're constantly watching them and we're constantly learning from them. And if we do lose to them, which we don't like, we really go to school to understand why we lost. But having formidable competition makes us stronger and better. So it's both it can give you indigestion, but it also keeps you full.
That's awesome. So how does ScreenDragon make life easier for remote and hybrid teams who are juggling life, work, and sanity?
In the same way that it does for teams that are together. I'd say the biggest thing that ScreenDragon does is gives visibility. And that's important when you're in the same building together and maybe on different floors, but it's amplified in terms of its importance when you're remote or hybrids. It gives visibility in real time all the time. And when you have visibility, you have proximity, so it brings teams together closer.
So your career is like a wild roller coaster. What's been the most rewarding ride that makes you look back and smile, such as a gig that made you thinking, I could do this forever?
All of them. And it may sound like a cop-out, but if you think about it, I've had like sort of 3 chapters. 17 years at Leo Burnett in the agency world, which is just extraordinary experience. 12 years, give or take, on the client side at Kimberly-Clark and Kellogg's. And now for the past 5.5, 6 years as an investor. And they've all been great. And they've all been incredible experiences for me because each one of them gave me a chance to wrestle with like really interesting, hairy problems, to be a disruptor, which is ultimately sort of what I love to do. And then most importantly, which is my oxygen, is people. So the through line of all of these things and that sort of roller coaster sort of ride that I've had has been sort of ideas and people, agitating and enabling. And that's been what's driven all of my decisions to the degree that I've made decisions, because I sort of stumble from one thing to another and doors open up and you go through them. But it's really the joy of working with fabulous people and challenging people for that matter, and learning from them and working with them and enabling them to grow, and then watching them go on and do incredible things. I mean, one of my greatest drugs is tracking people I've worked with and see how well they do. You follow them on LinkedIn, you get emails from them.
So stalking previous employees, okay.
100%. You just made me sound creepier than I am, if that's possible. But it's like, there is so much joy for me, like, and it's so self-serving in a way, and I'm unabashed in that, but it's like, when you see someone that you worked with and you had the chance of being, part of their career, little part of their career, and then you see them go on to do extraordinary stuff, like, it doesn't get better than that.
Oh,
right?
You're 100%. Like when I used to go to the conferences and I do interviews and someone come up to me and they go, hey, Pace, I used to work for you. Now I'm vice president of this company. I was like, I remember you were like one of my assistants at 21 and now you're vice president at Yahoo. It is a great feeling, especially when they tell you that you're partially responsible for their success.
Yeah. And it's a two-way stream. Like I sort of realized earlier on that I have some strengths, but a lot of opportunities. And so my sort of superpower, if there is one, is sort of the recognition that you need to surround yourself with really, really talented people and then give way and create space. And so it's a two-way street. And so I always feel like a sense of ownership, but also a sense of joy and then a sense of appreciation, because they all make you better. They all make you better
right.
if you open yourself up for it. And that's like at the end of the day, that's what keeps me going.
Is there any job you wouldn't do, even if they paid you like Scrooge McDuck levels of gold?
Yeah, a lot. I wouldn't go back to corporate, and I had an incredible time. If you count the last 12 years, Kimberly-Clark and Kellogg's corporate world, and certainly Leo Burnett, we were, the largest independent agency, and then we did the deal with Publicis, which is fantastic and continues to be fantastic. But yeah, I wouldn't go back to corporate for no money in the world. And we can get into a whole discussion about money and how much and enough and things like that. But there's no ways I'd do that.
Is there anything at Leo Burnett that shaped you into the powerhouse you are today?
Yeah, everything. I mean, that Leo Burnett was so foundational in terms of who I am today. And 100% because of people. A dead person, crudely. So I really went to school on Leo himself and read just about everything I could read on him. And the underlying sort of philosophy of the man and how he instilled that into the culture. Cultures like behaviors was extraordinary. But it was like over the course of my career at Leo Burnett, I got the gift of having a number of people who took me under their wing. And provided me the guidance, and were incredibly generous in terms of their willingness to sort of work with this, unsophisticated moron.
Anyone you can call out specifically?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, someone, I mentioned Al Rail. Al was like my first big boss. and became a dear, dear close friend, and my conscience and my mentor and my shrink. I mean, sadly, we lost Al, but Al was extraordinary. But my first boss, Liz, and, Jim Janess, who was this legendary guy, and Bill Lynch, they were the two guys, and Cap Adams and Rick Fisdale, and then one of the most beautiful humans I ever worked with, and Miguel Angel Ferones, who we also lost, the most generous and creative and incredibly positive human that I got to work with, and Frank Park, who was a dear friend of mine. So, I mean, I'm leaving people out, but that group of people, we still see the core group. We see each other once a year at least, and some of them I'm still very, very like every week, every day kind of friends. And then there were my clients. I mean, I grew up on the Kellogg business, so going back to Kellogg's in the end was sort of a full circle. But you build deep, 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 long personal friendships being in the trenches with your clients, and it was like, Carlos Gutierrez and Paul Norman and Jeff Monty and Dave Mackay and Tim Mobsby. And, I'm leaving tons of them out. But so if you ask me what my career arc was, it's just relationships with people that impact you and you hopefully impact them back. That's the math.
Looking back at Kimberly-Clark, Kellogg's, and Leo Burnett, what did you learn from these giants that you can't learn from a textbook?
Relationships. It all comes down to relationships built on common purpose and mutual purpose and mutual respect. When things worked, which it worked more often than not, but you get old and you sort of tend to get romantic and you paint the nice pictures. But we're all grown-ups, and not every day is a great day. Like if you have 3 out of 5 great days, you had a great week, right?
What was your biggest challenge working there?
And all of them, it's the same side of the coin. So when you have relationships that are based on mutual trust and mutual respect, and you're working together, and great things happen. When you have relationships that are broken, that are not built on mutual trust and mutual respect, it gets really bad. So for me, everything else is sort of fungible, but it's like those are both the rewards and the challenges. And so when it's bad, you have to get back to first principles and figure out what's broken in the relationships. And it's generally fundamental stuff: fear, ego, greed. It's the basics that sort of break things down. And if you're willing to get back to them and sort of have a little humility and take some hits and rebuild those relationships, and great things can happen. And interestingly, and I was talking about this the other night, I was teaching a class at UCLA. Some of the greatest lessons and greatest benefits that I've gotten is from repairing broken relationships and tough relationships and tough experiences. And I was sharing an anecdote that, Four Seasons, which for a long time and perhaps still was sort of one of the greatest brands in sort of quality of service. And they always had this mantra that true loyalty, true fans were created not when things were going great, but how you solve the problem. Because problems are inevitable. And I share that view is great relationships often, if not always, but certainly often, are born out of addressing conflict and breakdowns. And if you
Can you give us an example in your life where an epic fail turned into a win?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot, but where do I begin? The one that sort of always stuck with me because it was such an interesting one is when I worked at Leo Burnett at the agency, we were the consistency. Back in those days, we had more tenure than our clients. We tended to stay on the business longer, and there were more of us. And so when a brand person started Kellogg's, they would come to the agency and get an orientation for the brand, as bizarre as that may sound. And I remember there was a client who started, her name was Bev.
And free cereal for life, I hear, no?
100%, which is a good thing. And Bev started, and the more I worked and the more I leaned into the business and the more animated I was and the more I hustled, the worse she was to me. I mean, she was horrific to me. And eventually I got to a breaking point and I said, listen, it's clear this thing's not working. You hate me. I'm doing something wrong. I've tried a whole bunch of things. And now I think it's time for me to leave the account and go to another brand, and I'll get you someone who's better for you because this is miserable for me. And it certainly clearly looks like it's miserable to you. And Bev came to Chicago and she sat down with me and she explained to me that she'd had some pretty shitty experiences before. What I was trying to do was to be useful to her, and therefore I leaned in. What she was experiencing was someone was making her look bad because I had these long relationships with her boss and her boss's boss and her boss's boss. And so every time there was a question, they asked me. And I answered thinking that I was helping. And what I was doing is I was undermining her. And thank goodness that she had the willingness to come and sit down with me and explain to me what I was doing wrong and why and how it made her feel. And then I was like, that's not the experience I was trying to create. I was trying to do 180% the opposite. And so once I understood what my actions were resulting in, and ultimately people's behavior is based on their beliefs, and their beliefs are based on their experiences, and I was giving her a shitty experience. The minute I changed the experience, we became a team, and a really great team and good friends. And it just took me to understand and listen and understand what I was doing wrong and the impact I was having. And I got a million of those stories, and some that I never fixed because I was too dumb to see the problems. When you listen, if you're willing to listen and understand why people are behaving the way they're behaving, you can change the way you operate. Great things can happen. And I'm sure everyone has those experiences.
So how do you keep the fire burning in your career when the grind gets tough and the excitement fades?
Look, for me, I would say the minute you're not energized with what you're doing, then you have to ask yourself the question, should you be doing something else? And the way I get my energy is being around great, interesting people and great, interesting problems. And then really understanding what is your oxygen. So, if you look at my three sort of chapters, if you will, the first chapter was about learning. It was like drinking from the hydrant. It was about building a trade, if you will, learning advertising. It was just the world kept opening up and opening and opening up. Then I went to be a client, and it was this unbelievably steep learning curve of a whole different world. And it was about disruption and breaking and rebuilding and changing paradigms and that. And now I'm an investor, and it's about helping other people fulfill their dreams. And I think as I look back, it was sort of having the understanding that I needed to change the playing field in order to get the most joy out of what I was doing. The things I was doing the things I have done in all three and do in this current chapter are 100% the same, which is ideas, disrupting, and people. But the playing field changed and the role to deliver that change for me. And so I think sort of intuitively understanding that you need to make a little change to be more effective or to be more fulfilled or ultimately both is sort of what kept me going. I sort of think in 5-year terms, unless I'm miserable, which I haven't been. But every 5 years, I kind of ask myself a question, what does the next 5 years look like? And is it more of the same, or is it an evolution of the same, or a dramatic change?
So empathy and leadership, is it a buzzword or the real deal? And how do you see it in your world?
It's the deal. Again, I worry that I'm a bit of a broken record, but ultimately everything is about relationships and humans, by definition. And the degree to which you create value, the degree to which you create beautiful things, the degree to which you end the day and go, that was a great day, goes through humans and relationships. And no human relationship flourishes without empathy, the ability to understand the other person's reality. And I'll guarantee you that. Go ahead.
So without saying listening, how does one actually practice empathy with your team without sounding like corporate cliche?
Yeah. And by the way, listening's not because you can listen but not hear. It's understanding. Right. And it's like someone asked me a question like, do you have any regrets? And I was like, no, I don't have any regrets. And then I thought, because regrets are like, there's a lot of things I do different. 100% a lot of things I do different. But that's not it doesn't rise to the level of regret. And I went home and I thought about it and I go, actually, I do have a regret. I have one regret that's a recurring regret, which is the only time I have been disappointed in myself and feel like I failed is when I was unkind to humans, either by design, which was almost never, but through a lack of thought or a lack of self-awareness or because of my intensity, I created a negative experience with someone, and I regret that. And the flip side to the point of empathy is if you truly want to be empathetic, and when you do get it right, it means you slow down enough to think about what your actions are doing to impact the other person on the other side of the table or the Zoom or the phone or whatever it is. And so it's less about listening and it's more about slowing down and having the self-awareness or the willingness to ask, am I creating the experience that I intended? And is that experience positive? And if you can't see that what you're doing is not creating a good thing, then you're blind or a narcissist. So it's kind of like just self-awareness and going like, I got to believe that virtually everyone can walk away from or be in an experience or an interaction and be able to read whether it's going great or not, because you should be able to read body language and you should be able to feel the energy. And if it isn't, then change what you're doing. So for me, empathy is not a buzzword. It's a reality, and it's about a daily practice, and it's about the recognition that you're going to get it wrong. And sort of the willingness to sort of humble yourself and go, I was a dick in that conversation. That didn't get anyone anything, including myself. And so when I got it wrong, the many times that I have, I regret that.
So what's a book that changed your life? What's on your must-read list that you swear by?
I don't know that any book changed my life. I would just say I was a crazy, when I was younger, like a kid in grade school, I was a crazy reader. And it turns out I have dyslexia, ironically. But I read a ton. And I'd find an author and I'd read everything. And so the two that I remember when I was super young, I used to read a lot of Wilbur Smith. And Wilbur Smith was basically the same story, but it was an adventure. And it was really cool stuff. And then I started reading Leon Uris, and I became obsessed. I mean, I think I wrote Mila 18 in like one night, and it's about 580 pages. Or it was QB7, I forget which one. But and those two authors, aside from like the joy of storytelling, sort of taught me two things, which is like the willingness to sort of go out there and take chances and sort of push yourself beyond your limit, sort of Wilbur Smith, and the humanity and the impact on humans, and the need to be a scholar of history, sort of was born out of Leon Uris. I think some of the writing in Trinity and some of the relationships he created in the Hajj were just extraordinary for me. I don't think any books changed my life. Most recently, I read a book that my son gave to me, which is When Breath Becomes Air. And that was just an unbelievable, powerful story on multiple levels. That was absolutely a fantastic read and sort of made me reflect on a lot of things in my life. But yeah, I don't believe in sort of a book that changes your life or a movie that changes your life. I just think over the course of your life, you're constantly picking up crumbs and scraps, and you're building them into something that makes you who you are.
Who's taught you the most about your career, and why do they stand out? Like, who's your Obi-Wan Kenobi?
A lot of, I mean, I guess if you said who's the one person would be my late friend Al, because he was my go-to guy, and we were so incredibly close. And he was the one I was probably the most vulnerable and the least guarded with. And so I said Big Al, as we all called him. He was probably the most consistent. That being said, the way I've operated just instinctively is to take selfishly as much as anyone's willing to give and then ask for more from pretty much everyone I meet. And so I learn a ton from my kids. I have two incredible kids who are not kids, but 24 and 19. I learn a ton from my wife. I mean, my professional persona is I'm known as Kate's husband as opposed to I'm Clive Sirkin, and they've always referred to me as Kate's husband. I try to learn from everyone around me because it's there and it's free, and you'd be dumb not to. But as I said, when I talked about my career, I've had some really strong people over the course of my year that I've had deep relationships with.
What's the best piece of advice that was given to you?
It's just don't lose your humanity. It's the simplest, most powerful, most valuable piece of advice anyone can give everyone is never lose your humanity, because everything else you can rent, buy, or learn. But at your core and the relationships that you create and the impact you have is born out of your humanity. And so whether it was those words, but that's the lesson and the most important thing that I would tell anyone. There's probably 3 things I'd advise people. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is don't lose your humanity. And then the other is
Are you anyone else's Yoda?
I'd like to think I am. This is part of my blessing and my curse. I will never say no to someone who would pick up a phone or write me an email and say, "Can I talk to you? I need to ask you advice." If I make the time, you create time. And so I hope that there are people out there who would say, "Clive's my Yoda." I've been called other things, the drunk uncle, but whatever it is, I would hope that I have an impact. I try a lot, by the way. Certainly in the last 5 years since I've left the corporate world, is to help young college grads get their first role. Like that for me that's a super selfish endeavor, which is if you can use your network and your relationships to help someone coming into the workforce and get them their first experience and then be around to sort of talk to them as they go through their journey. Like that's a huge deal. And I had something happen 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine sent me his niece's roommate to help her find a role. And so we spent some time talking and I gave her some advice and sent her some books to read. And then I started connecting her to people. And one of the people I connected to, there were 2 sisters who I helped about 3 years ago. I lose track of time. 2-3 years ago, I helped them both get jobs. And one of them hired this new graduate that I met. So it was just a beautiful sort of symmetrical poetry of like full circle. And that gives me joy. It gives me nachas. It's a beautiful thing. I hope someone would say.
One person that you admire most, alive or dead, and why do they hold a special place in your heart?
You're funny in terms of like the one. I don't have a one. I really don't have a one.
Is there anyone in a historical figure that you'd like to meet? Let's try that.
Yeah. There's a number of them. I'd love to have met Golda Meir. I would have loved to have met people, all the usual suspects. The Gandhis.
Why Golda Meir? Besides being a strong, amazing woman.
She led in a time of such incredible change and disruption and creation of something. And was part of a time and a movement where something was created out of almost nothing, and born out of incredible hardships, and yet in the ability to sort of maintain focus and conviction and optimism to the degree that she could, I imagine, and also being a female leader at a time way beyond anyone. Like we're sitting here in America talking about one day we'll have a woman president. Here she's the leader of a country decades ago. Yeah, there's a bunch of people I'd love to spend time with and just pick their brains and talk to them and have a beer with them. But she's certainly up there on the top of the list.
So before we go, I like to ask everyone if you could send yourself a time-traveling text message to yourself when you started in the industry. What is one piece of advice you give yourself? And it can't be stock tips. Everyone keeps on saying that. And would you follow yourself?
If you give yourself a stock tip, it sort of takes the fun out of getting it right and in the joy of working the system. No, I just say take a breath and enjoy it more. I think there were periods where I was like super focused in like what's the next thing and how do I get the next promotion maybe. And so the only advice I'd say is enjoy it more. Take like marinate in it. I'm a lot more philosophical now, so I have more time to sort of step back and go, that was great. Like, that was a great experience. Or we just did that. So there were so many times where we had a win or we created something special and it was like, bam, on to the next thing. So I just got like, take it in, marinate a little bit more. It makes the flavor better.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the ADOTAT Show. Big thanks to Clive Sirkin for spilling the beans on his roller coaster ride from Leo Burnett to ScreenDragon and sharing his secrets on surviving the hybrid work circus. If you dug the no-nonsense wisdom and juicy tidbits, hit that subscribe button, drop a review, and share the show with anyone who needs a good kick in the pants. Major props to our sponsor, Troutman Amin, LLP. The law firm that's got your back when you're skating on thin ice. Stay tuned for more raw, and unfiltered conversations. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and know more than you did yesterday.